Hello crafty people, it's Sharon here and I'm back today with a new card for you featuring Lavinia Stamps, and I thought we'd go for a bit more of an autumnal look with perhaps a stormy or an autumn sunset kind of sky and a few new little techniques to bring in. So I've got a 5x7 inch card here, and we're going to basically start with a white piece of card and build all of this up using a few of our stamps and our distress inks and a little bit of pencil. So plenty to go with there, but actually very easy to achieve. So I'm starting off with my piece of card, which is set to fit a 5x7 inch card. I'll just check what I measured it at. So 12 centimeters by 17-ish, I think it's 17.2, and this is just smooth white card, which I can use for blending and stamping. It's fairly thick, it's sort of 300 GSM, so that's what we're going to use. I've got an art shaped stencil, which is one of my favourites, and I think I've had it a long time, but I think I got it from Clarity, but I'm sure if you look online you'll be able to find something similar, or you could use an oval shaped stencil if you prefer, for a slightly different look. Now what I've done is I've put my piece of card on underneath my stencil to try and gauge where I want it to be. So what I actually do is just put my stencil and my card in place, and let's do this again because this is slightly different shape piece of card, so let's rub those out. What I do is get my stencil in place, and then I need to just find a pencil, which I had and have now lost. Oh, there it is. Right, so my stencil is in the right place so that my aperture is sort of sitting equidistant on each side of my card. And then what I'm going to do is put a line, which is a marker where the edge of my card goes, on the front of my stencil like this, and I'm pressing quite hard. The idea is that I'll be able to see it on the other side. Now when I flip my card over, I can take my piece of cardstock and just place it in between those two lines, line up at the bottom, and then I've got some sticky masking tape on the bottom, which I'm just going to flip up to hold that in place. And then we should have our nicely placed aperture in position. And then most importantly, let's not forget to put this giant moon in. So that's just somewhere near the top, doesn't have to be precise, and then we're ready to go. So I'm actually using regular distress inks for my sky, and I've picked two colours. I've got Stormy Sky, as the name would suggest, and then I've got Dried Marigold to give sort of an orangey feel. And I'm going to use my round Lavinia brushes, but you could use any blending brushes that you've got. I just like these because they give me a little bit more control in terms of how much, where I'm going to place my ink. And what I'm going to do is take in my my Stormy Sky and a piece of scrap card. I'm going to take some of this, dab off the main part of the ink, and then just start to add very gently some Stormy Sky, and I'm just kind of going from side to side. Oops, I forgot to dab off them, but it doesn't matter, it all adds to the atmosphere. And I'm just randomly adding some of that blue, and what I can do is I can actually come back to this afterwards. I'm going to stop about 2/3 of the way down. Did it again, look at that. Oh well, it's going to be very stormy on this particular on this day. Right, and now I'm going to grab another brush and my marigold, dried marigold, and do the same thing. And I'm going to fill in the gaps. And what you'll get is some sort of combination of the orange and the blue. Actually, this isn't quite such a strong and juicy pad, so I can get away with not dabbing so much. And where it mixes with the blue, you're going to kind of get a more muddy shade, I guess you'd say. And then I'm just going to fill in so I've not got, you know, such obvious stripes, shall we say. And I'm just going to leave that there for a moment, because the next thing I want to do, if I bring in my original card, is I want to get my acorn in position, because what you can see is that I haven't got a solid line on the bottom here. It kind of starts solid up here and then fades out. So I need to get my acorn in position so that I can actually sort of create that effect. And this acorn is LAV981 Acorn Abode, which is the largest of the acorns. So let's just grab that out. And what I'm going to do is use my stamping platform for this one. So let's just make a little bit of space. And because I've got my stencil secured in place, what I can do is put my piece of card onto my platform and then just flip my stencil down to get it out of the way for a moment. And then I can pick up my magnetic pieces, which are in the most awkward position. Oh, look at that, I've just knocked my stencil all together. It's because my sticky tape is not really very sticky anymore, so I'm just going to grab that. But luckily, because I've got those guiding lines, I can put my stencil back in place without too much problem. So here's my acorn, and what I want to do is make sure that it's kind of straight on the floor, as in it's grounded. I'm bringing it slightly below the sky and also outside of the archway that I've created. And I'm going to stamp this with VersaFine, and I'm going for a brown for a change because it's autumn after all, and we've got pine cone, which seems quite appropriate. So let's give that a little stamp. We don't need to worry about our little character. We can add him in afterwards because he's sort of solid. But with the pine cone, I want to get that in place so that I can work around it with my sky and keep the inside of my pine cone nice and clean. Sorry, this isn't a pine cone, is it? It's an acorn. I need to get my terminology correct. That's because I was getting carried away with the pine cone ink pad. That's what that was all about. Okay, so now my acorn is in place. I just need to put my stencil back in position. So using the same technique, I'm going to put it in place and hopefully that'll be lined up. If not, I can just adjust it a little bit. Spot on by the looks of it. Okay, and we're ready to carry on with the sky. So back to what we were doing to start with. Sorry about that screeching. That's like nails on a blackboard, wasn't it? I'm going to take my stormy sky and start to fill in around my pine cone a little bit. I'm not going all the way to the bottom, but I want the sky to come sort of down below where the top of the pine cone is, so that we kind of got the pine cone sorry, not the pine cone, the acorn sitting in amongst this scene. It would look a little bit odd if the sky was directly, this horizon was directly in line with the top of this pine acorn, so that's why we're sort of doing what we're doing. And I'm not going all the way to the bottom because I don't want a harsh line at the bottom there, and I do feel like I've made a bit of sort of straight lines here with this, so I'm just adding some extra in. And you know what, if it's not a smooth blend, it doesn't matter at all. It's just adding to that feeling of texture, and everyone's going to come out a little bit different. There. Now, just for a little bit of extra atmosphere, I'm going to grab my one of my paintbrushes. Do you know what? I can't find anything today. Right, there we go. And some water. So this is a fan brush. Just put my ink pads back so I don't get water in those. And I'm going to add a little bit of splatter. It just adds a little bit of something really, which I don't think I even got any water on there on that one. Ooh, now we've got big splatters, but that's okay. So I've splattered some water on here, and then I'm just going to take a cloth and quickly dab away, and that just gives a little bit of atmosphere, and also takes away a little bit, if you haven't got, you know, perfect blend just like me, it takes your eye away from the blending a little bit. So now we are kind of done with this stencil for now, so let's take that away. And we're going to add some grounding on the bottom, and continuing with my distress ink pads, this time I'm going with a green, which is Rustic Wilderness, and I'm just going to grab that and start to bring some grounding at the bottom. So I'm doing the same sort of technique, picking up some and then dabbing off so that I don't go in too hard and heavy. And what I'm doing is just scribbling that green on the bottom, and I'm not worrying about going outside. In fact, I'm making sure I do go outside of my archway area, because I want this to sort of spread out and look sort of natural, almost like a vignette. So there's my green added, and as you can see, it is quite bright compared to the rest of it, because we're kind of doing the sun going down here. So I'm going to bring in a brown now, which in this case is frayed burlap, and I'm just going to dull that down a little bit. So picking up in exactly the same way, and I'm just going to start applying that on the top of my green, which immediately brings it down in terms of brightness, and also adds the beginning of some shadow around my lovely acorn. And I'm not worrying about going over the stones at this point either. And I've just got a smudge there, but you know what, I'm sure we'll be able to cover that somehow. So there we've got some grounding. And the next thing we want to do is take away this moon, and you'll see that it's kind of shockingly white. So what I'm going to do is go back to my blue stormy sky, and I'm going to just start to add some of that in based on what's left in my brush. Believe it or not, there is some in there, so I'm just swirling it around. And if I feel like that's not enough, I can go back to my stormy sky and pick up some more, but I really want to dab away first and just start to bring some more shadow in there. And then I'm going to get my orange, and I'm going to add some clouds. And for this I'm going to swap to a smaller brush and just very lightly start to drag across. create some wispy clouds going across the sun or the moon, whatever this happens to be. And I can also do the same with my grey, going back to my stormy sky. Again, giving it a good dab away. And just bring in some extra if I want to. And what that does, it sort of integrates this moon back with the sky around it. And I just did a really dark one there, but that's okay really, because there will be some darker ones, and I've just added a bit more darkness on the side there. So there we have our moon, and now we're about ready to start stamping. But before we do that, I'm just going to add in something a little extra, and that is a stencil. And what I'm going to do is take away the whiteness of this area around. So again, going back to my stormy sky, so we've got coherence. Let me just get some of these brushes out of the way, they're all over the place now. Picking up some of my stormy sky, really dabbing away because I want this to be almost invisible. And I'm just going to very gently add some of that around the edges. Now you can get sort of inners to cover up the archway in the middle here, but you know what, I don't really think we need it, so I'm just going very randomly. It's not precise, just adding a little bit of texture around the edge. And this is like a leafy stencil. And what that does, it just takes away that white starkness and just adds a little bit of something extra. Or you can leave it plain white if you prefer. It's really, you know, just down to personal preference really. But I tried it and I thought it looked quite nice, so I thought I'd do it again. Let's see what we've got. There we go. So now we've got some beautiful shady leaves around the edge of the card. And we are ready to begin with our stamping. So for the stamping element, we're going to go with VersaFine inks. And first of all, let's get our little person in place. Oops. I've just dropped everything all over the floor. And I've chosen this little guy with his shovel. Looks like he's at the end of a hard day of work. There are 3 different ones of these. They're called Herbalums. And this one is Herbalum Ben, LAV943. There's also one with a pitchfork and another one as well. So you can just choose whichever one you've got, or you could put an animal there, or you could put a fairy there. It can be whatever you want it to be. Now he's a solid little chap, so I'm going to go back to my stamping platform and make use of that. And we're just going to place him. I want to have him so that he's not standing away. I want to integrate him with this acorn, so I'm actually making sure that his little shovel here overlaps with the edge of the acorn, so they look like they're together rather than sort of floating in separate spaces, if that makes sense. And I'm going to use the same brown, so it's the pine cone, to stamp the little character. And this is a really lovely rich brown. It makes a nice change from the usual black. Definitely worth getting one of these, I think, because you can just add a whole different look to your pictures by using a different colour, particularly in the autumn. And there we are, he's stamped out beautifully. So that's him done. And now I'm going to actually use a freestanding acrylic stamp to do my other elements. So let's just get him out of the way. There he is. And so now the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of foliage around the bottom here. And I've just got an acrylic block for this because I want to be able to just move it around and do whatever I want to do, really. So I'm just going to grab a scrap of paper and just sort of tear it so that I haven't got a solid edge, and I'm going to use this as a mask. And for my foliage, I'm keeping it very simple. I'm just using these grasses, which are called, oh, they're thyme. But to me, they just look like sprigs of bushes and things. LAV 952. So let's grab that one out. And there are two sizes on here, which is really handy. So we've got the larger one, which I'm going to use first. And I'm going to make these in a green colour. So I've chosen Shady Lane for this one in VersaFine, and I want to be able to just have a bit of a ground line, so I'm just using a scrap of paper just to put the ground line there, and then we'll just give it a little stamp up and put our first one in position. So again, I don't want everything to be inside the archway, so I'm putting that one to the side there, and then I'm going to use a second generation, and you can actually, you know, not worry about stamping over our little person because he's in a much darker sort of colour, so we don't have to worry about that. And I'm going to go across to this side and just add something on the side here, but what I'm going to do is just use my piece of card and just make a mask again, so that the grass or the foliage is sticking out the back. And what I can do is stamp again, stamp the first generation off on my piece of card, and then I've got some more second generation to add a little bit more texture. And I also want to just put a little bit in here as well, so that it doesn't look like it's all in one place. Now I'm going to swap to the smaller one so that I can add a bit more bushiness. And basically continue on in the same vein. I don't need much of it. So again, I'm going to ink this smaller one. And I'm just going to add that below. That didn't come out very well at all, actually. But you get the gist. And let's ink it up again. Just put some here as well. There we go. So now we've got some little bushes on the side there, and I'm just going to give this a little clean. And next we're going to work on the archway on the top. And so for that I've got a selection of leaves which are all in one stamp set, and I think they're oak leaves. So we're going to start with those. Yeah, red oak leaf, LAV 990. And I'm just going to grab a big piece of scrappy paper now, because I really want to do some second generation and mixing about here, so that just makes it easier for me. And I've got three sizes of, or three different leaves here. I'm going to start with the biggest one, and we're going to start to create a sort of archway at the top here. And I thought it would be nice to add some colour. So I've got an extra ink pad here, which is acorn, which is a brownish colour for those leaves that are sort of dying away. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to get my green, stamp that on, And then I'm going to get my acorn and just touch some of the edges like that, and then place my stamp just at the top there where we've got that nice point to guide us. Lovely. And then I'm going to use my second generation, my third generation, and repeat the process. So although this brown is quite bright, by the time it mixes with the green, it dulls it down quite a bit, as you can see. So I'm going to put another one in place, and you know, don't worry about going over the moon, that's absolutely fine. Now, do I want another one? I think I kind of do, so I'm going to put that one in here. And again, everyone's going to come out different, so I'm just going to go with it. And then after I've done this one, I'm going to swap to a smaller leaf. Okay, that's okay for now. And then we're going to build on that with one of the smaller leaves. So I've got two leaves that look kind of the same and they go in opposite directions, which means we can create a nice curve on our archway. So just pick up one, doesn't really matter which one. And with this I'm going to go either with the green or the brown. So let's start with the green. Got a bit carried away there, so I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. And this one's sort of curving around that way, so I'm going to put it on this side. Let's put that in there. That's nice. And then maybe a brown one. And remember, it doesn't have to be first generation, so we can stamp away and just start filling this out a little bit. That didn't work very well. Okay, and then I'm going to swap to my other leaf. And start with the green. And back to the brown. Do you know what? I'm going to start again with that one. I'm going to have one of these going off at a different angle. And then finally, what I'm going to do is bring in those little grasses again. And I'm going to add some little sprigs. I've managed to get some of my ink onto my card there, but you know, that's just one of those things. Might have to do a little bit of disguising work with that. So I'm using my acorn again, stamping away, and I'm just going to add some of those sprigs, just to add some little bit of texture. I might even go and bring some in down here as well, just to disguise those little ink splodges that I created. So this is turning out to be quite a long tutorial, but there's lots of useful techniques in here that you can use and apply to other cards as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy this process. There we go, and I feel like that needs some green now as well in this area here. So I'm really building in, just because I needed to cover up that error that I had made, really. So this is going to be much more of a bushy kind of archway. There we go. So now we've created a big archway, and if I compare it, my previous one had much less going on the top. This one's quite a full one, so it's up to you how far you take that. And now we're ready to get on with some painting. So I'm going to paint the acorn and add some more depth and shadow into the bottom area here, just to ground everything. And for that I'm using a selection, in my case, of aqua pens. You can use any paints that you've got really, and some water and a little brush here. So first thing I'm going to do is, I've picked a variety of colours. I've got a couple of browns, I've got a grey and a sort of olivey green, and for the main part of the acorn I've chosen this chestnut colour. So what I'm going to do is scribble some of this onto my mat, like so, and we're going to pick some of that up and just get some colour onto our acorn. And I'm going in quite strong, I guess you might say. I'm going to pick some up and put it on the top here, but not necessarily all of it. And as you can see, I'm not doing anything particularly arty here. I'm just sort of scribbling and getting some paint on there. And then I'm going to pick my olive colour. And the idea is that when you, rather than just doing shades of the same colour, you're going to bring in a different colour, which makes it look more realistic somehow. Just adds a little bit of dimension to your piece. So I've got some green going in here, which I'm going to take around and over that brown. And acorns do have an element of green in them, don't they? So, you know, that works well. And it will mix and make different shades as well, which is really, really nice. And then I'm going to go back to my original brown. I'm just going to paint in this doorway. And you can see I'm not being very careful about it. I've gone over the lines all over the place. Let's get that out of the way for the moment. And now I'm going to grab my charcoal and do the same thing. Put some of that down. And taking some of this charcoal, I'm first of all going to put some onto my pebbles. And again, I'm just sort of adding them without worrying about covering everything, because it doesn't have to be, you know, too even. It adds texture if you don't do it completely evenly all the way around. So that's really nice. There we go. And I've made those stones around the doorway the same. I'm going to just add a little bit of grey at the bottom here. And before we know it, we've got our acorn, or the beginning of our acorn, coloured in. So now I'm going to just take some of that grey and just add to the bottom there, just to add to the shadows. And it's all going to mix with whatever's underneath, so it's going to work really nicely. There we are. Now what we can also do is bring a darker brown in, which is this tan colour, and just add some of that to bring a little bit of extra depth into our acorn. There we go. And we're just going to allow that a little time to just dry, because the next step we're going to do is to add some pencil, just to add some more depth without having to go to too much effort. Okay, so I've allowed a little bit of time for my paint to dry, and the next thing I'm going to do is bring in some pencils to just add a little bit more shading onto my card. And for me, I've got these Prismacolor pencils, but you can use any pencils that you like, and because we're basically just going to add some delicate shading, it's not going to be a massive amount of anything. So whatever pencils you've got to hand, you just need a green, a grey and a brown colour. So first of all, I'm going to get my green, and all I'm going to do is just lightly start to add a little bit of colour on top of my green areas, just to bring a little bit more texture in there and to bring a bit more depth of colour. So you can see I'm just bringing that in, and I'm not being too careful about it. Once again, I'm just adding here and there some of that green. You won't hardly see it, but it does make a difference. You would be quite surprised. Now I'm going to get my brown, and I'm just going to add some extra depth into the shadow areas. Perhaps on this doorway. Really, I think I should have left this a little bit longer to dry. But I'm basically going in and just adding another layer of colour in certain areas, just to bring a bit more depth. And I'm not just sticking to the brown areas, I'm going to go into that green as well, so that it all kind of just mixes and moulds together. And then I've got my grey colour on here. I'm going to really go in and add some shadow to ground everything. You can just add whatever you feel is appropriate. And I'm going to just bring in some dark lines on the bottom of these pebbles. To create shadow on those as well. Perhaps around the bottom of this archway. And I can bring that onto my acorn as well if I want to just make it look really dark at the bottom there. So there we have our colouring all complete, and we're now ready to either mat and layer or to add a border around the edge of our card. And my favourite thing to do, as you know, is to add an alcohol ink border around the edge of my card. So that's what we're going to do next. So bringing in a brown pen, and you need like a wedge tip pen for this, and some, bringing back my good old scrap paper again. I've got a piece of card which I'm going to use as my guide. And basically I'm going to line this up towards the edge of my piece of artwork, and then holding it firmly, I'm going to take my marker and drag it all the way down to the end to create a border, and I'm going to do the same, going all the way around. And what this does, it saves me having to find a piece of card that matches with my artwork. Saves on weight if you're posting this as well, but gives that effect of just framing it. It's a really nice little touch. And of course you could go to town and do this and then put another piece of card behind it, so you've got a double mat. That would also be really nice. So there we have our piece of card all framed and ready to go, and all I need to do now is to simply add to my card. So here we go with my favourite pin flare glue. And we'll just stick that to place, and because of the size I've done, it's just left a little white border around the edge. And there we have our finished card. So I'll just bring back my original card. This is card number 1 and this is card number 2. So they've come out quite different. If I zoom out a little bit, hopefully you can get to see. There we go, exactly the same technique, but we've come up with two quite different looking cards in terms of the depth and the colour, even though I've used exactly the same things. So that's my card for today. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you like what you see, I would love it if you would subscribe to me and put a like against this video. That helps the algorithms to get this out there. And then I look forward to seeing you again for another card not too far on from now. But that's it for me for now. Bye for now. Keep crafting and look after yourselves. Bye.